Meanwhile, you think today's sell-off is worrisome? Why a guy who used to be the top bailout cop in Washington fears something far worse if Washington doesn't get far more serious? I always love this guy because both Democrats and Republicans ended up hating him. So there's something to be said of that. Neil Barofsky out with a new book, Bailout, an inside account of how Washington abandoned Main Street while rescuing Wall Street. It's just out. I'm talking about perfect timing as Washington faces another fiscal crisis. Can any lessons be learned from the guy who had to police a TARP program that he took seriously policing? Neil, very good to have you. Of all days, you to show up in New York, my friend, and I'm not there.
It's kismet, Neil. I don't know what to make of it.
It is. It's a great book, and it's a timely lesson. And what's timely about it is you're a bipartisan basher. That Republicans and Democrats have produced a mess that they're still not addressing. The biggest is this indifference to money and accountability. Why don't you explain that?
You know, Neil, when I got to Washington, I was a federal prosecutor for 8 years. I was shocked when I saw the degree of capture, the amount how much our economy has been taken over by the interests of a handful of Wall Street financial institutions. And that was translated by virtual control over their bailout programs. The regulators at the Treasury Department, whether it were Bush Treasury or if it was Obama Treasury, were so deferential to the interests of Wall Street that they always put the interests of the Wall Street banks at every critical juncture over that of the broader economy, off of Main Street, whether it's struggling homeowners or getting loans and money out to small businesses, and from a series of choices. And part of the reason I think why we're seeing our struggling economy so much was a result of those failed policy decisions, which were, again, always about pushing back on transparency, pushing back when I would try to make recommendations to protect these programs from fraud or misuse. I mean, what was typical for me to face, beginning in December of '08 and all the way through March 11, would be reactions like, we don't need to worry about transparency. We don't need to worry about fraud protections because we can just trust the banks. You know, they would never risk their reputation by putting profit over everything else. Of course, they're just going to lend this money into the economy without any strings or attachments. And that was the attitude that I was dealing with. And part of the reason why we're still in this economic malaise was because of those decisions.
But part of that malaise is this idea that we've maybe corrected things now, that part of the new financial law is that we won't let banks hoodwink us again. This notion too big to fail is gone, that if an institution comes across duress, it's on its own. Do you buy that?
No, we had a real opportunity in 2010 to make that a reality. There was a bipartisan bill working its way through Congress, and talk about this in the book, that had support from Republicans, Democrats. It was sponsored by Senators Brown and Kaufman, and the administration led the charge against it. And Secretary Geithner personally got involved to make sure that bill didn't pass. And at that point, we could have broken up the banks.
Weren't they both the same way, Neil? Isn't your criticism that a lot of this began with the Bush administration, continued with the Obama administration, but the policies to, by and large, keep the financial institutions as they are remain?
Absolutely, a protection of the status quo and going easy on the banks. I mean, I think that's part. We're seeing this with the fallout from the LIBOR scandal. You know, we saw it in the mortgage modification program in TARP, when the banks when their servicer arms were just doing unbelievable abuses towards homeowners, ignoring the rules that Treasury had set, and Treasury's reaction was again enablement. They were afraid, oh no, the banks might leave the program, which gives you a sense of where the levers of power and how they're pulled in Washington, and then other excuses not to get tough with the banks. It was always about protecting the banks. I mean, at one point, when Secretary Geithner was confronted at a meeting we were at, he explained that his view of the housing program was to foam the runway for the banks. Again, even the program that was supposed to help Main Street was all about foaming the runway.
He doesn't seem to flip over you, Neil. Tim Geithner doesn't seem to flip over you, or this notion that he wasted taxpayers' money. This is from Treasury Secretary Geithner.
People were deeply misled about the basic choices we face and the alternatives we confront in that context. A lot of people, including many of my critics, said we went out and gave and lost trillions of dollars of the American taxpayers' money at that time. Deeply misleading, terribly damaging to confidence, and the cost of that has been very damaging to the president, and I think damaging to the integrity of the basic effort.
I'm so glad you showed me that clip,
He was
Neil.
kind of ripping you. I think he was kind of ripping you.
No, I'm so glad you showed that clip. So the question that preceded that was a question about the criticisms in the book. And what Tim Geithner did right there was he erected a straw man. He suggested that I said something that I never said, this notion that I suggested that the TARP would lose trillions of dollars. In fact, what's interesting is that in my book, on page 163, because I was just looking at it, we talk about how Treasury put out that same misinformation, that same misleading idea that I was saying one thing when I was saying something quite different back in 2009.
But you did lay out the possibility and your fears at the time and later policing how this money was spent and would be spent and not wasted, that it could be a slippery slope. I'm paraphrasing here, that it could go to other means, other devices, other rescues, other potential money-losing ventures that later were vindicated. That's exactly what happened. So what's the lesson to be learned from, let's say, government rescues in general?
Well, I think the problem here, the biggest lesson, is that as long as we have a financial system where our regulators are so captured and so deferential to the Wall Street interests, doesn't matter who's in power, the bailouts are going to look a lot like they did here, where we don't see a recovery from the economy. We see a focus on protecting the banks, enriching the banks, and enabling the banks. And until we do two things, Neil, one, we got to break up the banks so they don't have this corrupting influence. And second, we rethink our regulatory structure so we don't have these incentives built in the systems for regulators not to do their job. We're going to keep having these problems. You know, there was one incident, Neil, that I talk about in the book where I was confronted by a senior member of Treasury, and I was told that if I didn't change my tone, I was going to do real harm to myself. My critical tone of Wall Street and my critical tone of the administration, but that if I changed my tone, was a little bit more upbeat, well, good things could happen to me. Maybe a judgeship or something like that. That's a real problem with our regulatory system. It's unusual that it was said so explicitly to me, but that decision, that dichotomy...
It was pretty blatant, and it was a little Tony Soprano-ish, by the way, but you handled that pretty well. But Neil Barofsky, thanks for all you did and all you do, and I think it's a bipartisan compliment that you've got them bipartisanly so angry at you, so there must be something there.
Thanks, Neil.
So it's a book for thought. Neil Barofsky is the guy behind it, the former Inspector General of TARP. Much, much more